The scent of roast chicken and rosemary filled the dining room, a familiar, comforting aroma that usually felt like a warm blanket. Tonight it felt thin, like a sheet draped over something cold. My 70th birthday. Alex and Chloe had insisted on cooking, on making a fuss. The table was set with my late wife's good china, the silver polished to a high gleam. It was all a stage, I realized later, carefully arranged for the performance to come. Alex raised his glass of Pinot Noir, a practiced corporate smile on his face. To Dad, he said, his voice smooth and confident, 70 years young. Chloe clinked her glass against his. To many more, she added, though her eyes flickered around the room, already assessing, already calculating the square footage, the value of the art on the walls. We ate for a while, the conversation a gentle, meaningless hum. They talked about their latest deal, a multi-million-dollar property acquisition that required them to be, in their words, ruthlessly efficient. I listened, nodding occasionally, my fork moving from plate to mouth with a rhythm that had been honed over decades of observation. I was the audience, and they were the players, completely unaware of the role they had assigned me. Then came the pause, the moment after the main course, before the cake, the space where important announcements are made. Alex cleared his throat, placing his cutlery down with deliberate neatness. "You know, Dad," he began, leaning forward with an expression of sincere concern. "Chloe and I have been talking. We're a little worried about you out here all by yourself." I took a slow sip of water, saying nothing. The best interrogators know that silence is the most powerful question. It's just, "Your life has gotten so quiet," he continued, filling the void I left for him. "So predictable. Water the roses, read the paper, do the crossword. It's not enough. You need more stimulation." He gestured with his hand, painting a picture in the air. "We found this place. The Oaks. It's a vibrant senior living community. They have a swimming pool, bridge tournaments, guest lecturers. There's a constant buzz. You'd love it." The words hung there. Vibrant senior living community. They were such sterile marketing brochure words. They contained no history, no soul, no memory of the woman I had shared this house with for 45 years. They were just labels for a neatly packaged solution to a problem they had invented. I felt my wife's absence then, a physical ache in the room. She would have known how to deflect this with a witty remark, how to protect me from their clumsy, condescending kindness. It was Chloe who drove the knife in, twisting it with a smile. "It's for the best, Dad," she said, her voice a syrupy echo of my son's. "You need more than just puttering in the garden. You've become so boring." The word landed in the center of the table with a quiet, devastating thud. Boring. It wasn't just an observation, it was a verdict. A casual dismissal of my entire life. It erased the decades of silence I had cultivated, not out of emptiness, but out of a hard-won necessity for peace. It dismissed the discipline of my routines, the sharpness of my mind that still solved the crossword in ink every morning, the profound, deliberate quiet I had built as a fortress against the noise of a world I had once known too well. My hands were resting on the tablecloth, one on either side of my plate. I looked down at them. They were still, perfectly, utterly calm. These were the hands that had held a gun in the trembling dark of an East Berlin alley. The hands that had turned the pages of files containing the most dangerous secrets of the Cold War. The hands that had built a life of profound, intentional peace from the ashes of a career built on chaos. And now, my own flesh and blood, the son I had read bedtime stories to, was looking at those hands and seeing only the slow, placid movements of an old man watering his roses. He saw the stillness and mistook it for stagnation. He saw the quiet and labeled it a void. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just let the word hang in the air between us, let its poison dissipate in the lamplight. I watched my hands, these old, steady instruments, and I felt a familiar ice-cold clarity begin to settle in my chest. The performance was over. See, the real work was about to begin. The silence in my house is not an absence of sound, but a presence. It's a dense, textured thing built over 30 years of careful living. A week has passed since my birthday dinner, and the sting of their words, boring, predictable, quiet, has not faded. It has instead settled into the quiet rhythm of my days, becoming just another piece of data to be processed, another variable in the long equation of my life. My day begins at 5:45, not with an alarm, but with the internal clock that has never failed me. The first light of dawn is a pale, grey smear against the window panes. I make my bed with hospital corners, the sheets pulled so taut you could bounce a coin on them. It's not about neatness, it's about order. It's about control over the few square feet of the world that are truly mine. The garden comes next, my roses. They are my one permissible indulgence, a splash of vibrant, living color against the muted, deliberate backdrop of my existence. I water them, not with a hose, but with a galvanized steel watering can, the same one I've used for 20 years. Each plant gets its measured share. I watch the water soak into the dark soil, and I watch the leaves for any sign of blight or pest. Observation is not a task, it is a state of being. I see the way a leaf curls, the particular angle of a new bud, the faint trail of a slug from the night before. These are not just details, they are a language, a story of cause and effect, of small actions leading to large consequences. Breakfast is one piece of toast, black coffee, and the newspaper. I read it front to back, but I am not reading for the news. I am reading for the patterns, the obituaries, the financial section, the local politics. They are all pieces of a larger, shifting puzzle. I do the crossword in ink, always in ink. It forces a commitment to your first, best answer. There is no room for second guessing, for erasing a mistake and pretending it never happened. You live with the letters you put on the page. Then there are the habits, the small rituals that would seem like quirks to anyone else. When I leave a room, I scan it. Not a casual glance, but a slow, deliberate sweep from left to right. I note the position of every object, the lie of the rug, the angle of a chair. It's an inventory. When I return, I perform the same scan, my mind comparing the before and after, checking for any deviation. When I lock the front door, it is a three-part sequence. The deadbolt turns with a solid metallic thunk. I then press my shoulder against the door to feel the jam hold firm. Finally, I give the knob two sharp testing tugs. It's not paranoia. It is procedure. It is the muscle memory of a life where a door left slightly ajar could mean a silent entry in the night, and a misplaced book could be a signal you failed to see. This is the discipline they mistake for dullness, the patience they see as passivity. They have no concept of the mental fortitude it takes to remain utterly unremarkable, to sand down every interesting edge until you are nothing but a smooth, featureless stone on a beach of millions. The greatest skill I ever learned wasn't how to tail a target or build a dead drop. It was how to disappear in plain sight. They came by yesterday, Alex and Chloe. A surprise visit, though I'd seen their car turn onto my street 3 minutes before their knock. They swept in on a cloud of expensive perfume and self-importance, their voices too loud for the quiet rooms. "Just wanted to check on you, Dad," Alex said, patting my shoulder as if I were a family dog. He was already looking past me at my simple furniture, his mind no doubt calculating its negligible resale value. Chloe floated through the living room, her fingers lightly brushing the top of a bookshelf, checking for dust. "We were just in the neighborhood after a closing. A $12 million property," she added, the number dropped like a pebble into a pond, expecting ripples of awe. "It's a different world, Dad. So fast-paced. You wouldn't believe the pressure." I offered them tea. They declined, saying they had to get back to the city, back to their important lives. They stood in my doorway, these two children playing at being titans, and they looked at me with a fond, gentle condescension that was sharper than any insult. "It's so peaceful here," Chloe said, and the way she said peaceful made it sound like another word for empty. "Just take it easy, Dad," Alex said, his tone implying that taking it easy was all I was capable of. I simply nodded, my face a placid mask of grandfatherly acceptance. I watched them walk back to their sleek German car, their postures radiating a certainty they had not earned. They saw a quiet old man in a quiet house. They did not see the decades of training that allowed me to stand so still. They did not see the observer, the analyst, the archivist of human folly, waiting patiently for the right moment to turn the page. They saw the calm, and in their arrogance, they never once stopped to consider what kind of storm it was preceding. The dust in the attic had a particular smell, a scent of forgotten time, of mothballs and old wood, of a life carefully packed away. I was downstairs making tea, the familiar ritual of kettle and leaves, a small anchor in the increasingly turbulent sea of their help. I could hear them up there, the heavy, careless tread of their expensive shoes on the floorboards above my head, the sound of boxes being shifted, not with reverence, but with the impatient efficiency of people tidying up a problem they had insisted on the attic. "We'll just make a start, Dad," Alex had said, his voice dripping with a condescending benevolence that set my teeth on edge. Get a jump on the packing. The move to that vibrant community was, in their minds, a foregone conclusion. My protests were the quaint mutterings of a stubborn old man to be gently overridden for his own good. I didn't hear the moment they found it. There was no dramatic gasp, no shout of discovery, just a lull in the noise, followed by a low conspiratorial murmur. I knew, of course, I had always known they would eventually go through everything. Privacy is the first casualty in the war of caring for your elders. They see it as a right, not a privilege. The box was a simple gunmetal grey strongbox, unremarkable and sturdy. I'd bought it from a hardware store 40 years ago, a practical solution for a few practical items. The lock was a cheap brass thing, more for show than for any real security. It was a decoy, in a way. A test. A man with nothing to hide would have a flimsy lock. A man with dark secrets would have a vault. I had chosen the middle ground, the appearance of minor, mundane privacy. I heard the distinct, sharp snap of the lock giving way. It was a small sound, but it echoed in the silent house like a gunshot to my ears. They didn't even have the decency to feel shame. There was a chuckle, Alex's voice, loud and clear now. "Got it? Wasn't much of a lock, was it?" I stood at the bottom of the attic stairs, the tray of tea in my hands, growing heavy. I didn't ascend. I listened. I became a statue, my breathing shallow, my entire being focused on the space above me. "Ooh, what's in there?" Chloe's voice, bright with a tourist's curiosity, the rustle of paper, a moment of silence. Then Alex again, a laugh in his voice. "Well, well, well, look at this." I could picture it in my mind's eye with perfect, painful clarity. His hands, soft from a life of keyboards and steering wheels, pulling out the book. My book. It was bound in worn, dark brown leather, the surface scarred and smoothed by time and touch. There was no title, no inscription, just the faint, ghostly imprint of a hammer and sickle I had long ago tried to rub away. "It's a diary or something," Chloe said. "Look at the writing." "It's not English," Alex replied, his tone one of amused discovery. "Is that Russian?" A burst of laughter from both of them. It wasn't malicious laughter, not really. That was the truly insulting part. It was the laughter of people who have stumbled upon a delightful, slightly embarrassing novelty. "I knew it," Alex crowed, his voice booming in the confined space. "All those business trips to Europe, Dad had a secret Russian lover, a spy novel romance right under our noses. Ooh, read a bit, Chloe giggled. I can't read it, it's in Russian, he said, and I could hear the pages being flipped, his fingers smudging ink that was older than he was. But look at the dates. This is from the 70s, 80s, back when he was always traveling. They treated it like a relic from a museum of my quaint past, a curious artifact, a funny story to be trotted out at parties. You'll never guess what we found in my boring old dad's attic, his secret Russian diary. They held in their hands a chronicle of a life lived in the shadows, a ledger of moral compromises and cold, stark terror. They held the confession of a ghost, and they thought it was a romance novel. This is perfect, Alex declared, the master of ceremonies for his own little show. We should get this translated for his birthday. Can you imagine the look on his face? It'll be a great surprise. A surprise they thought they were planning a party trick. They were, in their blissful, arrogant ignorance, commissioning their own indictment. They were paying for the translation of a weapon they were about to hand directly to the person they intended to use it against. The irony was so profound it was almost beautiful. I finally moved, my feet carrying me up the stairs, the tea tray a flimsy shield. I found them standing there, dust motes dancing in the slanted light from the small window. The open lockbox sat at their feet. Alex was holding the diary, not with reverence, but like a prop, a smile still playing on his lips. Find anything interesting? I asked, my voice carefully calibrated to sound mildly curious. A touch weary, Alex held up the book, waggling it. Just your little secret, Dad. Don't worry, your Russian is safe with us. He winked. For now. I looked at the book in his hand, and then I looked at my son, and in that moment, the careful, quiet life I had built began to fracture, not with a bang, but with the sound of their careless, condescending laughter echoing in a dusty attic. The grocery bag was light in my hand, just a few essentials, milk, bread, the good coffee Alex and Chloe pretend to like when they visit. The house welcomed me with its usual silence, the kind of quiet I'd cultivated like a second skin over the past 30 years. It was a clean, orderly silence, broken only by the soft click of the deadbolt turning behind me. I hung my keys on the hook by the door, the one shaped like a tiny anchor, and my eyes did their automatic sweep of the living room. Couch, armchair, the newspaper folded neatly on the ottoman. Everything in its place. It was the dust that caught my eye first. A faint shimmering film on the surface of the side table by the attic stairs. It had been disturbed. My feet carried me forward without a conscious command, the grocery bag forgotten on the floor. The attic door was ajar, just a sliver, but it was enough. I always keep it latched. Always. I took the stairs slowly, my hand not touching the railing. The air grew warmer, thicker with the scent of old paper and cedar. And then I saw it, the lockbox, the one I'd kept tucked behind a crate of my late wife's winter clothes, was sitting out in the middle of the floor. The cheap brass padlock, a decoy really, something to suggest trivial secrets, was lying a few feet away, its hasp bent and broken. The box itself was open, its lid thrown back, its dark, empty mouth gaping at the rafters. The diary was gone. A coldness, sharp and precise, began to spread from the center of my chest outwards. It wasn't panic. Panic is a hot, messy thing. This was different. This was the cold of a deep space vacuum, the absolute zero of a profound and irreversible violation. I stood there for a long moment, just breathing, feeling the architecture of my carefully constructed piece begin to fracture. I found Alex in the backyard, phone in hand, scrolling through something with a faint, self-satisfied smile. Chloe was beside him, pointing at a rosebush and saying something about color schemes. Alex. He looked up, his smile not fading, just shifting into a different gear. Pity, amusement. "Hey, Dad, get everything?" I kept my voice level, a flat plane of sound. "The lockbox in the attic, it's open." His smile widened. He actually chuckled. "Oh, that. Yeah, we found it when we were up there earlier. We were just trying to help you get a head start on the, the move." He said the word move with a gentle emphasis, as if reminding a child of a forgotten chore. "Where is the contents of the box?" I asked. "Relax, Dad." He waved his phone dismissively. "We found your little secret diary, the one in Russian. Pretty sneaky." He winked. Chloe giggled beside him, a light, tinkling sound that felt like shards of glass against my eardrums. "We're getting it translated," Alex continued, his tone one of conspiratorial glee. "As a surprise for your birthday. I mean, come on, a diary in Russian. All those business trips. Maybe you weren't so boring after all. Did you have a secret Russian lover or something?" And that was it. That was the click. It wasn't the broken lock. It wasn't the theft. It wasn't even the invasion of a privacy I had guarded with the vigilance of a sentinel for 3 decades. It was this, the sheer, staggering, breathtaking amusement, the way he said, "little secret diary," as if it were a boyhood journal full of crushes, the way he reduced a lifetime of shadows, of choices made in blood and fear, to a salacious punchline about a foreign affair. They were treating the ledger of my soul, a document written in the cold sweat of midnight in East Berlin, in the adrenaline-sharp silence after a dead drop, in the grim finality of actions taken to ensure the survival of nations and my own fragile conscience, as a quaint novelty, a fun little mystery to be solved over wine. They were pawing at the scars on my spirit with the clumsy, condescending curiosity of tourists at a zoo. The coldness in my chest solidified into a diamond-hard core. Every patronizing word from the birthday dinner, every gentle suggestion about my quiet life, every look that dismissed me as a harmless, puttering old man, it all crystallized in that single contemptuous laugh. They saw the stillness of the deep water and mistook it for emptiness. They had no conception of the pressure, the darkness, the things that lived in those depths. The final straw wasn't their disrespect for me, it was their disrespect for the gravity of the history they now held in their hands. They thought it was a story. They were about to learn in the most intimate way possible that it was an instruction manual, and the lesson was about to begin. The sound of their car engine faded down the street, swallowed by the mundane sounds of a suburban evening. I stood at the window, my hand resting on the cool glass. The silence they left behind wasn't empty. It was heavy, filled with the echo of my son's laughter. "Relax, Dad. We found your little secret diary." Little secret. The words hung in the air, a spark that ignited a fire I had spent 30 years carefully banking. But this wasn't just blaze of anger. No. This was something far more controlled, far more dangerous. It was the cold blue flame of a welder's torch, precise and purposeful. As I watched the empty street, the memories didn't flood back in a chaotic rush. They assembled, like soldiers falling into a long-forgotten formation, each one clicking into place with a chilling, crystalline clarity. My mind didn't go to the grand speeches or the medals in a drawer somewhere. It went to the grit, the feel of things. I remembered the cold, a specific penetrating cold that seeped through a worn leather coat on a November night in East Berlin. The dead drop was a cavity behind a loose brick in a wall slick with grime near the spree. The package wasn't there. That was the first wrong thing. The second was the scent of cheap cologne lingering in the alley, a cologne worn by a man named Klaus, who was supposed to be in Dresden. My heart hadn't hammered in my chest. It had simply gone still, a lump of ice. I had walked away, not too fast, not too slow, my every sense screaming that crosshairs were painted between my shoulder blades. I spent the next 48 hours in a safe house that smelled of damp concrete and boiled cabbage, waiting for the all clear, my hand never far from the weight of the Makarov pistol tucked into my waistband. Then there was the face. Not a photograph in a file, but the living, breathing face of a man I had shared vodka with just the week before. A double agent. His name was Anatoly. He had a nervous laugh and a fondness for American jazz, a dangerous indulgence in those days. I remembered the exact way the light from a single bare bulb in a warehouse off the Karl Marx Alley had caught the panic in his eyes the moment he realized I knew, the moment he understood the game was up. The report in the diary would have read, "The asset was neutralized, compartmentalization preserved." It said nothing of the sound, a dull, wet thud that was somehow both loud and terribly quiet. It said nothing of the weight of his body as I dragged it into the shadows, or the smell of iron and cheap tobacco that clung to my clothes for days afterward. I had to neutralize him. That was the word we used. It sanitized the act, turned a life into a logistical problem. But the memory never sanitized. It remained raw, visceral. That was the constant, you see, not the glamour, but the icy fear. A cold knot in the stomach that was your permanent companion. It was in the way you scanned a crowd, not for a friend, but for the one face that didn't belong. It was in the way you held a coffee cup, your grip loose and ready, not tight and comfortable. It was in the silence between heartbeats when a car pulled up behind you and stayed there for one block too many. This was the life they had found amusing. This was the secret they were having translated for a laugh. The Archivist. They would read that name in the diary. They would think it was a quaint, mysterious alias. They wouldn't understand its truth. An archivist doesn't create the history. He preserves it. He catalogues it. He knows where every single body is buried, both literally and figuratively. He understands that information is not just power, it is the very fabric of reality. And whoever controls the narrative controls the world. And that's when it formed the plan. It didn't erupt in a flash of inspiration. It unspooled in my mind, cool and logical, a blueprint laid over the map of their lives. They think my diary is a story, an entertaining tale from a man they presume to be boring. They are treating a testament of survival, a chronicle written in the ink of fear and resolve, as a quaint novelty. Their amusement is the ultimate insult. It's a disrespect not just for me, but for the gravity of every choice, every sacrifice, every silent scream contained within those pages. Very well, I will show them it is not a story, it is a manual. I will use the very principles detailed in that book, the psychological manipulation, the patient intelligence gathering, the elegant misdirection, but I will not use them to crush them. I am not a monster. I am a teacher, and they are in desperate need of a lesson. The target is not their careers, or their finances, or their health. The target is their arrogant, unshakable sense of security. It is the condescending certainty with which they move through their world, believing themselves to be the players, the masters of their universe. They believe their problems are high stakes, their property deals, their hidden debts. They have no concept of what real stakes are. I will teach them. I will make them feel the first chill of the unknown. I will let them catch a glimpse of the abyss that exists just beneath the thin veneer of their comfortable lives. I will orchestrate a scenario where their own secrets, the very tools of their self-importance, become the instruments of their humiliation. They will not be physically harmed, but their worldview will be shattered. Their confidence will be dismantled, brick by arrogant brick. They wanted to know the man behind the diary. They will meet him. Not the secret Russian lover of their jokes, but the archivist. And by the time I am finished, they will never, ever again mistake my silence for emptiness, or my patience for weakness. they will look at their quiet, boring father and finally see the sleeping lion they so foolishly poked with a stick. The decision was made. The switch, once thrown deep inside me, could not be unthrown. They had opened the box, and now I would open their lives. Not to destroy them, my children, never that, but to teach them, to show them that the world they thought they controlled was a house of cards, and that a single gentle breath from a man they considered a ghost could bring it all down around their ears. This was my countermove. Phase 1 was intelligence gathering. It's the most boring, most critical part of any operation. People think it's all car chases and dead drops, but it's mostly patience and observation. I started with a visit to their sleek modern townhouse, a monument to glass and ambition. I brought over a pie, a harmless fatherly gesture, while Alex was proudly showing me some new smart home gadget and Chloe was fussing in the kitchen. I had my moment. In the living room, behind a heavy ornamental vase on a bookshelf filled with books they'd never read, I placed a listening device no larger than a shirt button. It was a simple, reliable model broadcasting to a receiver in my garden shed. The act itself took less than 10 seconds. My hands were steady. My heart rate didn't elevate. It was like riding a bicycle after 50 years. The body remembers the balance. For the next week, I listened. I listened to their arguments about money, their vapid conversations about their social climbing friends, their condescending pity for poor, quiet dad. And then I found the gold. Alex, on a phone call I recorded, speaking in hushed, excited tones about a property deal. It wasn't just ambitious. It was shady. He was leveraging insider information, planning to muscle out a long-standing local business to sell the land to a faceless corporate developer. He mentioned his biggest rival, a man named Peterson, with a sneer. He was so proud of his cleverness. Chloe's secret was quieter, more desperate. It came out during a late-night, tearful phone call with her sister, a call she thought was private. A series of bad investments, a secret loan she'd taken out to cover them, and now the debt was a crushing weight she was hiding from Alex. She was terrified he'd see her as a failure. Her parents, wealthy and judgmental, were the last people she wanted to know. With the intelligence secured, phase 2 began, psychological pressure. This is an art form. It's not about screaming threats, it's about whispering doubts. I needed to get inside their heads, to make the walls feel like they were closing in. I started small. One morning, Alex found a small Cold War-era Stasi pin neatly placed on the windshield of his expensive German sedan. He'd probably just flick it aside, think it was trash, but the seed was planted. A few days later, Chloe's phone rang. When she answered, a calm, accented voice on the other end simply said, Sovershenno Sekretno, top secret in Russian, before the line went dead. A wrong number, she'd think, a prank. But coupled with the pin, with the stress of their own hidden lives, the paranoia would begin to curdle. I listened as they discussed these oddities. It's just stress, honey, Alex told Chloe. That deal with Peterson is making me jumpy too. They were rationalizing, trying to fit my carefully laid breadcrumbs into the narrative of their own making. They were so busy looking for monsters in the shadows of their own making, they never once thought to look at the kindly old man watering his roses in the midday sun. I was the perfect ghost. Then came phase 3, the Masterstroke. An operation is only as good as its finale. I needed a public setting, a place where their carefully constructed facades of success and control would be most vulnerable. Their annual firm gala at the downtown museum was perfect, a room full of the very people whose opinions they valued most. The day of the gala, I set the wheels in motion from my quiet study. Using a series of encrypted, anonymous relays, I sent 2 emails. The first went to Alex's rival, Peterson. It contained just enough specific, verifiable detail about Alex's underhanded tactics to make it credible, but not enough to reveal my source. The second went to Chloe's parents. It was a simple, polite note suggesting they might want to have a conversation with their daughter about her financial health. Before things escalated, I timed the delivery for the peak of the evening, when the champagne was flowing and the laughter was at its loudest. I sat in my armchair, the receiver from the listening device on the table beside me, and I waited. It started with Alex's phone vibrating incessantly. I heard his forced, cheerful tone turn sharp, then panicked. "What do you mean he knows? How could he possibly know?" he hissed, moving away from the crowd. Minutes later, Chloe's phone rang. I heard her gasp, then a strained, "Mother, now? What are you talking about?" Her voice was a thin wire of panic. Through the microphone, I could hear the beautiful, chaotic symphony of their simultaneous unraveling. The clinking glasses and jovial chatter of the Gala formed a perfect, ironic backdrop to their whispered, frantic crises. They found each other in a corner, their faces ashen, their worlds collapsing in on themselves at the same moment, in the most public place imaginable they knew then. This wasn't a coincidence. This was coordinated. This was an attack, and the precision of it, the intelligent, unseen force behind it, was finally terrifyingly clear. The game was afoot, and they were no longer the players. They were the board. The front door didn't just open, it exploded inward, the wood frame splintering with a crack that echoed through the quiet house. I didn't flinch. I'd been expecting them. Alex stood in the doorway, his face a blotchy mess of rage and panic, his tie askew, and his expensive suit jacket wrinkled as if he'd been clutching at it. Chloe was half a step behind him, her usual composed mask shattered, her eyes wide and swimming with a fresh, humiliated terror. They didn't see me at first, standing there in my dimly lit living room, breathing in the scent of my own fear and their impending collapse. They were too lost in the storm of their own making. "What did you do?" Alex's voice was a ragged shout, stripped of all its polished financier confidence. It was the raw, frightened bleat of a cornered animal. "How do you know any of this? Only we knew. We only told you." Chloe pushed past him, her finger pointing, trembling. "My parents. You called my parents. How could you? That was my private business." I let them stand there for a moment, two frantic children screaming into the void they had so carelessly created. I was sitting in my worn armchair, the one they had so often looked at with pity, a symbol of my quiet and predictable life. The translated diary, a thick, unassuming binder, was open on my lap. My gnarled old man's fingers rested gently on its pages. I slowly lifted my head. It started in my spine. A lifetime of practiced slouch, of making myself smaller, less noticeable, simply uncoiled. My shoulders, which had carried the weight of so many secrets for so many decades, pulled back. The gentle, slightly confused stoop of my posture straightened into a ramrod line of authority. I lifted my chin, and I let my eyes, which had spent years looking faded and distant, find theirs. The change was not dramatic in its motion, but it was seismic in its effect. It was like watching a stone statue awaken. The kindly, slightly befuddled old man they thought they knew simply evaporated from my face. What was left was something sharper, something colder, something that had seen the dark corners of human souls and had not flinched. My gaze locked onto Alex's, and for the first time he truly saw me. Not his father, not the old gardener. He saw the predator that had been living in his father's skin. The room went silent. Their angry words died in their throats, choked off by the sheer unnerving transformation. The only sound was the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The quiet, measured tone I used was far more terrifying than any shout could ever be. "The most elegant form of action," I began, my voice low and clear, each word a carefully placed stone, "is not a direct assault. It is the careful orchestration of a target's environment, applying precise pressure to their greatest vulnerabilities until they are maneuvered into orchestrating their own destruction." I saw the words land. I saw them trying to place them. They sounded familiar, but from where? My eyes flicked down to the open binder on my lap, then back to their horrified faces. I had quoted verbatim a line from the diary. A line written in a safe house in Vienna more than 40 years ago, after I'd turned a Stasi informant against his own handler, using nothing but rumor and the man's own pathological greed. The penny didn't just drop, it fell like a guillotine blade. I watched the sequence of realizations detonate behind their eyes. The strange anachronistic pin on their car, the whispered Russian phrases, the simultaneous public evisceration of Alex's shady property deal, and the exposure of Chloe's secret debt. The sheer impossible precision of it all. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't bad luck. It was a campaign, a meticulously planned and executed operation. Their arrogance, their condescension, their casual dismissal of my life as something boring, it all curdled in that single horrifying moment into the truth. The man they had patronized, the man they had planned to shunt off into a vibrant community, was not a harmless relic. He was the architect. He was the unseen, intelligent foe who had systematically dismantled the foundations of their carefully constructed lives, using their own secrets as the wrecking ball. The color drained from Alex's face so completely he looked like a wax figure. His mouth worked, but no sound came out. He took an involuntary step backward, his body recoiling from the terrifying reality standing before him. His eyes were wide, staring at me as if he were seeing a ghost. His own father, a stranger. His gaze dropped to the diary, the source of all their amused curiosity, now revealed as the blueprint for their ruin. He finally found his voice, but it was a broken, airless thing, a whisper of pure, unadulterated shock. "The Archivist," he stammered, the code name from the translated pages, tasting like ash in his mouth. That was you." He wasn't asking for confirmation. He was stating the terrifying, inescapable truth. The ghost from the past wasn't in the book. The ghost was me, and I was no longer sleeping. The silence in the room was no longer just an absence of sound. It was a physical presence, thick and heavy, pressing down on all of us. It was the silence that follows a detonation, after the shockwave has passed, but before the dust has settled. I watched them, my son and his wife, standing there in the wreckage of their own certainty. Their frantic energy from moments before had evaporated, leaving behind two hollowed-out shells. The color had drained from their faces, leaving a waxy, pale complexion. Alex's mouth was slightly agape, his eyes wide, unblinking, fixed on me as if he were seeing a ghost. No, not a ghost. Something far more unsettling. He was seeing the stranger who had been living in his father's skin for decades. Chloe took an involuntary step back, her hand fluttering to her throat. Her gaze darted from my face to the translated diary lying open on my lap, then back to my face, as if she were trying to reconcile two utterly irreconcilable images. The kindly, slightly doddering old man who puttered with his roses and did crosswords was gone. In his place sat a man with a spine of steel and eyes that had seen things they could only nightmare about. The facade I had maintained for their comfort, for my own peace, was gone, shattered by their own arrogant curiosity. I let the silence stretch, allowing the full weight of their realization to crush down upon them. They weren't looking at a victim anymore. They were looking at the architect of their very public, very precise ruin. The man they had planned to shunt off into a vibrant community was the same man who had just orchestrated the simultaneous collapse of their professional facades with the cold efficiency of a master strategist. "You wanted to know my secret," I said, my voice calm, level, devoid of the gentle tremor they were used to. It was the voice I hadn't used in 30 years, the voice of the Archivist. It was a tool for conveying information, not emotion. "You treated my life, the blood, the fear, the things I had to do to survive in a world you cannot even conceive of, as a joke. A quaint story from a boring old man's past." I watched the words land, each one a hammer blow. Alex flinched at blood. Chloe's eyes welled with tears, not of sadness, but of pure, undiluted terror. They had read the translated pages. They knew the words neutralize and dead drop and asset, but they had read them as fiction, as a thrilling novel. Now they understood they were reading a memoir, my memoir. "I simply gave you a practical demonstration," I continued, closing the diary with a soft, definitive thud. "You invaded my privacy for your own amusement. You dismissed my entire existence as something to be managed and tidied away. So I showed you what it feels like when someone truly invades your life. When they don't just rifle through your attic, but through your finances, your secrets, your very sense of security." I leaned forward slightly, and the movement, so small, made them both recoil. It was a deeply satisfying sight. "You felt watched, didn't you? Paranoid. You dismissed it as stress. That was your first mistake. Underestimating your opponent is always the first mistake. The Stasi pin, the Russian phrase, those weren't threats. They were courtesies, warnings you were too arrogant to heed." Alex finally found his voice, but it was a broken, raspy thing. "The deal. Chloe's debt. How?" "The how is irrelevant," I said, cutting him off. "The how is tradecraft. The why is the lesson. You thought my life was small. You thought my past was a story. Now you know it is a set of skills, and the most important skill I ever learned was patience. The patience to wait for the perfect moment to act." I saw the last vestiges of their old worldview crumble to dust. The move to the retirement community, that condescending, pitying plan they had for me, hung in the air between us, now the most ludicrous, laughable concept in the world. Who would dare try to manage a man who could dismantle their lives from his garden chair? The subject was dead. It would never be mentioned again. It was buried under the rubble of their shattered arrogance. They stood there, humbled, truly, deeply humbled, and terrified. There was a new, profound respect in their eyes, but it was born from fear. They were looking at a weapon they had unknowingly pointed at themselves. They were looking at the sleeping lion they had poked with a stick, and now the lion was awake and he was looking right back at them. The dynamic in the room, in our family, had irrevocably shifted. The power was no longer something they held over me out of a sense of paternalistic duty. The power was mine, and they knew it. They had learned in the most visceral way possible that the deepest waters are always the stillest. The scent of charcoal and searing meat is a simple, honest thing. It doesn't lie. It doesn't hide agendas. It just is. I watched the smoke curl up from the grill, a lazy grey ribbon against the deep blue of a late summer sky. My roses are in full riotous bloom, their perfume mingling with the smoke, a testament to months of quiet, patient tending. On the surface, this scene is a carbon copy of 100 other afternoons from a life they once called predictable. But everything, absolutely everything, is different. Alex turns the burgers with a focus I've never seen him apply to a barbecue before. His movements are deliberate, almost reverent. He used to juggle the spatula with his phone, barking orders into it, a man too important for the simple act of cooking. Now the phone is inside, silenced. He is fully present in this moment, in my garden. He glances at me, not with the condescending pity of old, but with a measuring look. He's assessing the heat, the cook, but he's also assessing me. It's a look of deep, unnerving respect, edged with a sliver of something else, a permanent, healthy caution. Chloe brings me a fresh glass of iced tea. She doesn't just set it down on the patio table beside me. She hands it to me directly, her movements careful, almost formal. "Here you go, Dad," she says, and the title no longer feels like a casual label for an elderly relative. It feels earned. It carries weight. Her eyes meet mine for a second too long, and I see it there too. The memory of their world collapsing in on itself, the terrifying precision with which it was orchestrated. They don't see a boring old man puttering with his flowers anymore. They see the architect. They see the calm in the eye of the storm they lived through. A few weeks ago, Alex came to me not for a recipe or to fix a leaky faucet, but with a sheaf of financial documents, a proposed merger. He didn't ask for my blessing, he asked for my assessment. "What am I missing here, Dad?" he'd asked, his voice low. "The numbers look solid, but I have a feeling." I spent an hour with him, not talking about balance sheets, but about human nature, about the tells of a man who is over-leveraged, the subtle signs of desperation a good deal shouldn't have. I spoke about pressure points and incentives, the same principles I'd once applied in darkened alleys of foreign cities, now applied to a corporate boardroom. He listened, he took notes, and he walked away from the deal. He later found out the CEO was days from being ousted by his own board. Alex didn't thank me for saving him millions. He just looked at me, and the understanding passed between us, silent and complete. This is my life now. I still deadhead the roses. I still do the crossword in ink every morning. The routines are the same, but the man living them is not. I am no longer playing a part, the sleeping lion, as I once thought of. That dormant part of myself is awake. He doesn't need to roar. His presence in the pride is enough. The change is most palpable in the small, quiet moments. Last Tuesday evening, we were all watching a film when old Mr. Henderson's dog across the fence started its frantic, insistent barking at something in the night. A few months ago, Alex would have sighed in annoyance and turned up the volume. Chloe would have complained about the noise. This time they both fell silent, and then in unison they turned and looked at me, not with a question, not with a request. It was an instinct, a primal, unspoken acknowledgement of a hierarchy that had been violently, irrevocably established. They looked to me to interpret the threat, to gauge the intent behind the sound in the dark. I simply listened for a moment, identified the cadence as the dog chasing a raccoon up a tree, and gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of my head. It's nothing. The tension left their shoulders instantly. They trusted my read of the situation, my judgment of the unseen, more than they trusted their own eyes and ears. So here we are, at a family barbecue. The laughter is easier now, more genuine, because it's not layered over a foundation of condescension. There is a new honesty between us, forged in the fire of a lesson they will never, ever forget. They consult me now, not on the art of tradecraft, but on the art of life. They seek my foresight, my patience, my understanding of the deeper currents that move beneath the still surface of things. I'm still their father. I still love them with a ferocity that would surprise them. But I am also the archivist. And my mere presence in this garden, quietly watching the smoke rise, is enough to command the entire pride. The evening sun catches the dew on my roses, turning each droplet into a tiny, perfect world. I can hear the low murmur of Alex and Chloe talking in the kitchen, their voices careful, respectful. It's a sound I've grown accustomed to over these last few months. It's not the sound of fear, not anymore. It's the sound of understanding. People confuse a quiet life for an empty one. They see a man watering his flowers, doing his crossword, and they write a story over the top of him. They see the stillness and assume there's nothing moving underneath. They called my life predictable. They called me boring. What they never understood is that predictability is a choice. Silence is a weapon you forge in the fires of chaos. I spent 30 years in a world where a single misplaced word could mean a bullet in the back of the head. In a dark alley, I learned to read the micro-expressions on a man's face that betrayed a lie before his lips even finished forming it. I learned to feel the shift in the air when a meeting had been compromised. I learned that the loudest person in the room is almost always the most vulnerable, because they are trying to convince everyone, including themselves, of their own importance. So when I finally got out, when I buried the Archivist and built this simple, quiet life, it wasn't a retreat. It was a victory. This garden, this peace, was the prize for surviving a war they couldn't even imagine. They mistake patience for weakness. They see a man who doesn't react to a petty insult, who doesn't rise to a challenge, and they think he's broken or timid. They don't see the calculation. They don't see the hours, the days, the years of training that taught you that the most powerful move is often to do nothing at all, to wait, to let your opponent reveal their hand, their insecurities, their entire strategy, while you simply observe. Impatience is a flaw. It makes you reactive. It puts you on the defensive. Patience is a predator's virtue. It allows you to become the architect of the situation, not a participant in it. But a still surface often hides the deepest waters. A pond can look placid, mirroring the sky, giving away nothing of the dark, cold depths below, of the strong currents that could pull a man under in a heartbeat. My son and his wife saw the surface. They saw an old man puttering in his garden. They never saw the decades of training, the memory palaces filled with faces and codes, the instinct for human psychology that had become as natural as breathing. They dipped their toes into my waters, thinking it was a kiddie pool, and were shocked to find an ocean. Never underestimate the man who has learned the value of silence. Words are currency. You spend them carelessly and you are bankrupt. You hoard them, you use them with precision, and you hold immense power. The silence in a negotiation is more telling than any demand. The silence after a question is a tool that pries the truth from people. My silence for all these years wasn't emptiness. It was a reservoir. It was a library of every secret I'd ever kept, every lesson I'd ever learned, every betrayal I'd ever survived. He isn't boring, he's just choosing his battles. And that is the final, most important lesson. You do not waste your energy on skirmishes. You do not reveal your capabilities for a minor slight. You conserve your strength, you maintain your cover, you live your life. You let them believe their story about you, because their belief is your greatest camouflage. You only act when the threat is to the core of who you are, when the disrespect is so profound it can no longer be ignored. You act not with rage, but with a cold surgical finality that leaves no doubt about the balance of power. You teach a lesson that will echo for the rest of their lives. And if you're smart, you'll hope you're never one of them. You'll hope you never become the target of a man who has nothing left to prove. A man for whom conflict is not an emotional outburst, but a professional calculation. A man who has looked into the abyss so many times that he knows exactly how to guide others to its edge and let them stare into it for themselves. You will hope you never make the mistake of poking the sleeping lion, because when he awakens you will not find a gentle grandfather. You will find the architect of your own undoing. I gently pinch off a spent bloom from one of my rose bushes. It's a small, deliberate motion. It's not about the flower itself, but about the health of the whole plant, about directing energy to where it's needed most, about maintaining order. I hear Alex call out, "Dad, dinner's ready." His voice is different now. There's a weight to it, a recognition. I look at my roses one last time, at their quiet thorny beauty, and I turn to go inside. The lion is awake, and his pride is finally, truly his.